Welcome back, everyone, for another Adventure Box podcast. My name is Zach Edwards. I'm the CEO of Historical Conquest, the people that are supporting this podcast. You know, this is so great because you can actually learn so much more than you're going to learn in a classroom, or if you're an adult, that you're going to be able to hear outside of this podcast, because we like to go in depth. Now, at the same time, we don't actually go fully in depth because there's just too much to talk about. And we have about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit more, but we try to keep around 30, 35 minutes. And so, without further ado, today we are talking about the birth of a nation. There we go. That's the textbook. Pretty good size. It's got everything about it. I mean, seriously. Even if you want to know what happened day to day while they were in the Continental Convention, yeah, you're going to find out, or Continental Congress. You're going to find out because it actually has it all laid out. Now, you might not want to read all that. You don't need to. There's actually highlighted ones, other ones that are really that important. But if you want to see the mindset of how things evolved through the process of creating the greatest nation on the earth, now this is not a statement to say that we are better than everyone else, but we are the greatest nation for us here in the United States. And like, my opinion would be we'd be the best around the world, but at the same time, I don't put it out that we are prideful of who we are. We are proud in the sense that we are very, what am I trying to be PC about it? We love our nation. I mean, this is great. This is a great nation. And we hope that everyone else finds the success that we found. And we found that in order to have the success, we had to have what's called the Constitution. The Constitution is a simple document. Well, it's the convention, but... Oh, yeah, sorry. That's going to be my next presentation. Okay. But this is the Continental Congress. This is what had to happen in order for us to have what we have today. And they're going to go through all the different parts of creating a nation. And it takes them months to get this done, even a year to get it done. Because there's so many differing opinions. Like, for one thing, okay, so I have an opinion of something, and I'm going to give a generality as to my opinion on something, and I write up a document. It's all going to be one-sided. I would be an anti-federalist. I'd want the states to have a lot more rights, but I also want to have a centralized government. On the other side, and so I'm more of in the middle, but there's the anti-federalists that want to have the states have more rights, and there's the federalists that want to have the central government, the federal government, have most of the control. I'm one that wants to be right in the middle because of that same reason. I think I mentioned this last week. I was at a convention. Some guy walks in front of me. He was a Christian apologist, and so he was teaching kids or people about being an apologist. And it was really interesting to talk to him because at one point he makes the statement. It's like, the government was never, or the country was never supposed to have just two parties. I said, you know what, I'm actually grateful for not that there are two parties, but that we had two parties, and there is actually a reason for having two parties. What are they? Well, think of it this way. And you can have multiple parties, but you have to have multiple thoughts, multiple opinions. But if one is an extreme of one side and one's going to be an extreme of the other, and you have to come to a compromise in between, you're actually going to compromise, but you're also going to find out every single loophole that might be in it, whether it's the loopholes on this side or the loopholes on this side. You're going to want to find out where the loopholes are, and the extremes of these two sides will get you there. Now, we don't want the division that comes with two extreme sides, because that's what the compromise is about. That's what the Constitution is about. We wrote the Constitution looking from as many sides as possible, but basically on two. Does the federal government have more power, or does the states have more power? How do we reconcile and compromise between the two? How do we find all the loopholes that we can? Why can the Constitution be a rock-solid document that fulfills all the needs of even 200 years later, almost 250 years later? It's because there was two sides. Now, again, if it had three sides, that would have been fine, because it would have given so much more to every aspect that could have been. But in this sense, I don't know if you really could have had more than two in the anti-federalists and the federalists. One wanted states' rights, one wanted less states' rights. If you had people in the middle, the party that says the middle, they're not really helping out. If you had someone say in the middle and an anti-federalist, you would have been more in the middle of that. If you had the federalists and the middle ground, whatever that party is, and there's no anti-federalists, you would have had further into federal government. So these two basically extremes, these both sides, made our country what they are today. Now, at the same time, I'm actually an independent, so I don't like the Republican Party because they have no guts behind them. They don't stand up for what they believe a lot of times. Well, okay. And then there's Trump, who does. I mean, he totally stands up for what he believes and pushes others to do the same thing. But then you have the Democrats who just have a history of bigotry and racism and all these other things. And then they've merged into something that's like completely different, but not always in the best ways. So that's why I'm an independent. I'm just putting this out. I'm in the middle. I want to be able to have both sides heard because it's the only way that we can actually get our country to be better established. But now, for instance, I do like what is happening with Trump going through and finding the waste in government. It's like 80% of the country believes we should have accountability in the government and stop the wasteful spending. 80%, 80+%. At the other side, you have, we need to have all these different programs because they help everyone. The problem is, I don't want you running my life. I don't want you telling me what to do in my life. And so the stronger the federal government, the more they can tell you what to do. The states, basically, I can move somewhere. If I don't like Missouri, where I'm at right now, I can move to Alaska. There's a lot of freedoms up there. I can move to Texas. A lot of freedoms up there. If I want other things, such as I want sunshine or Silicon Valley, I can move to California. I have mobility. Now, my wife loves to tell me, not everyone can move around. I totally agree. If you've been listening to this for a while, you know that I'm divorced. I have a parenting plan that says I have to stay in this city until my kids are older. Well, that's based on what? It's not based on the government. It was based on a choice that I made and my ex-wife made. And we agreed upon it. So I'm staying here. My choice. Not the government's choice, my choice. Not the court's choice, my choice. My ex-wife's choice. That's why we still have mobility if we so desire it. Now, I have a really good relationship with my ex-wife, so I could actually move. I mean, she'd probably move too if we brought it to that kind of discussion. And we have ways of working things out. But we will want to because it's the best thing for our kids. But again, my choice. Not the federal government's choice. Not even the state's choice. My choice. Okay, so going back to this, how do you actually create a perfect union or as perfect as possible? Well, you want to be able to bring everyone's voice in and have compromises between however many parties you have, but making sure that there are voices on both sides. So how did they do it? So they had the Constitutional Convention come together. They had this group of people who met in Philadelphia. Let me see. Yes. So in Independence Hall, Philadelphia, and actually we've got a great picture for this one as well. Let me show you the next picture. Nope. We'll get back to all that. This is basically what they believe how it was set up during this time. Now, this is actually, if you go to Independence Hall, you'll actually see this room set up as it is. I've been there. It's great. It's a great experience. But, yeah, that was Philadelphia. That was Independence Hall. And I'm going back because I have so many things to talk to you about, but I wanted to flip to that little image there. Okay, so now let's go back. I've already given you a brief overview of the whole thing. Let's go back and start talking about the ins and outs of this. So let me begin how it was going to begin. Welcome to Founding Principles, the birth of the nation and the government. And today we're stepping back into the summer of 1787 when delegates from across the 13 states gathered in Philadelphia. Now, I do actually have a picture of that. At the time, this is what the country looked like. you had everything from New York, Pennsylvania, you had all the smaller states. Virginia, that was huge. Well, now it's Virginia and West Virginia. And the Carolinas, well, that's North Carolina and Tennessee. Tennessee, Kentucky. Kentucky's on top? Yeah, I think Kentucky's on top. Georgia, Tennessee, and so forth. South Carolina, and again, all the small states. You had an unorganized territory. You have the Louisiana, what would become the Louisiana Purchase, and also the viceroyalty of New Spain. Basically, Mexico controlled. Well, it was at this time Spain controlled, but Mexico was basically a continuation up to this point. Okay, so that's where it was at this point. Now, if we were to actually start up a government, all these pink states actually had to agree on something. So they created the Constitutional Convention. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a battle of ideas. As I mentioned, also compromises, intense debates. Literally, this took months for them to go through. And today we will explore all the different ins and outs. Some of the delegates, we're going to talk about the debates, the compromises that were made, the structure that was created. So let's get into this. Okay, so let's set the stage. May 1787, spring, nice day outside. Philadelphia, not too humid. These people come together. It's the United States. Basically, we talked about this last week, is almost in a crisis. They have the Articles of Confederation. Now, those were basically like the Constitution, but based on the facts of all the information and all the structures that they could put together during a war. Because the Second Continental Congress is what put together the Articles of Confederation, which did not allow for most of the things that a government needs. It also made the government very weak. So they could not collect taxes, they couldn't regulate trade, and they couldn't really maintain order. Basically, every state had their own militia and had to hope that they could actually run it. You had economic struggles because we were hugely in debt, including Shays' Rebellion. If you didn't listen to last Wednesday, go back and listen to that. You're going to hear about this great rebellion against the U.S. government before it was really even established. Okay, so during this time, Continental Convention, delegates from 12 states, not Rhode Island. So this little guy right here did not actually show up. So we only had 12 of them. They arrived in Philadelphia, so Pennsylvania over here. And that was in May, again, the spring. They wanted to fix the government. But instead of simply revising the articles, they decided they had to start from scratch. Why? Because now they weren't in a war. It was somewhat peace. Now, they did actually have some struggles going on with Britain. They were not relenting. They were doing other things instead of war to gum things up, including some of their loyalists that were in the States. But we're not going to go over that today. We'll do that later. Okay, so let's talk about the convention's goals. Or sorry, let's talk about the key figures, and then we'll talk about the goals of the Continental Congress. And I might just add them into the people that are there. Okay, so, and this is going to be based on, was based on the people. So, who do we know that was there? Who were the main people? Okay, everyone knows George Washington, right? George Washington, he was not the president at the time. There was no president and there was no executive branch at all. They didn't even have that on the purview at the time. But he was chosen to become the president of the convention because his presence basically made everyone else want to be there. Who is someone like that that commands, not commands, that is in, he demands it, but it commands so much respect from all the colonies? One man. There was just one man that could bring it all together, and that's George Washington, which is why I can actually say that he is one of the most important people in modern day history when it comes to the evolution of the United States. Number one most important person, flat out. Doesn't matter if you like political people today or if you like pop stars. Taylor Swift had nothing on George Washington. Trump had nothing on George Washington. Why? Because George Washington commanded so much respect from all the colonies. Everyone. in the future, we're going to be talking about it, but he gets chosen unanimously as the president, the first president of the United States. And he had the hardest task. Now, you could say Trump has a very hard task right now because he's trying to reestablish some order in the country and some taking out all the fat that's being there. Okay, that's one thing. But George Washington was head over heels above him because he was the start of the nation and he commanded so much respect from everyone. If he wasn't at the convention, there's actually a good chance that less of the states would have shown up. We might not even have had a convention. Now, who else? James Madison. You might know him as the father of the Constitution. We're going to go over that in the next Wednesday's episode. So you're going to want to stick around for that. Alexander Hamilton. Wow. He was a strong supporter of the centralized government. James Madison was also wanted a strong federal government. These were the Federalists. Okay. Then who else did you have? You had Roger Sherman. He was more of the linchpin that allowed for negotiating on the compromises. He was great when it came to that. Now, and those are the four main characters. You're also going to find like Benjamin Franklin. You're going to find a lot of other ones that you've heard of, and we're going to go through those. But let's talk about the goal right now. The goal to the convention was to create a government that was strong enough to govern, but not so strong to threaten liberties. Okay, so strong federal government, which Madison and Hamilton both wanted. George Washington was also good with it, but George Washington was also on the fact of wanting the rights. The anti-federalists were the ones that wanted more freedoms for the people, not just for the states. Though they wanted more power for the states, they wanted more freedom for the people. And who could actually control the freedoms? They thought the states could, because again, if someone doesn't like what was happening in Georgia, they could move to North Carolina, or they could move to Virginia, and so on and so forth. Okay, the first big questions that came with this convention, right away, the biggest debate was on how states should be represented in Congress. Okay, so you have 13 states, you have the delegates there right now. You basically have an early Senate at this constitutional convention. The second question, the large states wanted representation based on their population, while the smaller states wanted equal representation to protect their influence. A state, like let's say New York, it has a huge population. They wanted to have as much strength, but you could also say that Georgia also wanted a huge amount of strength. Georgia was very pro-slavery. New York, very moderate to less or no slavery. So they wanted to have an influence. So again, the two big questions, who represents the states in the Congress, and those that wanted more because they had more population. They had more people that they had influence over. So if you know the government right now and how our government is set up, you can say, hey, wait a minute, this is actually like perfect. This is why we have the branch and the Senate. But we're not going to get there yet. We're not going there yet because what we're going for is this. This is what we call the Pinckney plan. I'll just show them right now. This is the New Jersey plan of how the government's going to be run. And for some reason, my screen is not doing the best. It accidentally went to the opposite polarization, so I don't know how to exactly get it back. I'll fix that in the near future. Oh well. Yeah, so you can see the main parts, but you can't see all the writing. I'll just explain what it is. So, okay, New Jersey had a plan, and Hamilton had a plan. One thing that most of the plans had, so let's just root out New Jersey plan. As you can see, you can't see it very well, but there's the Congress. They are right in the middle. There's one branch of the Congress. Then there's the courts, and there's the military, and there's the 13 states to ratify. It actually became a very complicated plan trying to get it all to work. But those that promoted the New Jersey plan, from New Jersey, of course, wanted all the power to be in Congress. Well, it doesn't really work that well. Okay, the Pinkerton Plan, or Pinckney Plan, by actually Pinckney. I can't remember his first name, but the Pinckney Plan was based on, you have a House of Delegates, a Senate, the President, and a council on both sides of the President to basically like a cabinet. You had the court system. You had the states that basically you take a regulation and the states mandate in there. And then these are the 13 states that basically produce the House of Delegates. Now, this was nice. This is actually similar to what we were doing, but there was a plan that actually came out first. This plan was this one, the Virginia Plan. Now, the Virginia Plan was not fully accepted as it was. There was a lot of compromise in how it was actually produced. But, again, I'm so not happy that this is inverted. Let me see if I can... settings. Let me pause this and I will get right back to you. Look at that. We got it. Okay. So here we go. So we have the first branch, no name. The second branch, no name. As in like House and Senate. So these were over the taxes, and then it would pass it over to the second branch. Then the 13 state legislatures would be able to be given, so they're given the rules. The 13 states, their legislatures would implement it, and then it would go back and be ratified and be accepted and such. Well, this was also overly complicated. This came out to the point of, you know what, this might not actually work. Now, one of the issues I did not bring up with the Pinckney Plan, let's see, let's go with the Pinckney Plan. Yes, it's the one. The one thing that became very troublesome, I don't know where you came up, drop down. The Pinckney Plan, you see, you got the federal judicials, appeal to states courts, international law. They want to actually live by the international law. This is appeal to last resort in the dispute between states and international law. It's like, no. No state, no country actually lives 100% the last dispute with international law. You can't do it. So in here you have the states, the House of Delegates. A lot of people here. Then the Senate. It does not have all those people in there. But this one's fun because it says from 4 districts by rotation of 4 years. So people would actually be rotated in and out by 4 years. So, and then you have a president. And you have a council of revisions. No. No government should ever have to live off of the council of revisions, because what does that do? That puts unelected bureaucrats in charge of the government. Now, a council, appointed office, these are his cabinets. But the council of revisions, no, that was not acceptable to many. But you did have the federal court system. So this is fairly similar to the Virginia Plan. And the Virginia Plan is the closest that we got. Okay, so now, in the end, this is what they came up with. Yeah, it looks a little more complicated. It's actually not. Okay, so think of this way. You have 3 branches of government. You have the legislative branch, the executive branch, the judicial branch. In the legislators means that they legislate, so they make laws. They make laws and rules in the government. You have the Congress, which is broken up into the House and the Senate. That's it. That's basically the legislative branch. That's how it was supposed to be. Then you have the executive branch, where you have the POTUS. POTUS is the President of the United States. P-O-T-U-S. So in that, you have the Vice President, who actually, the Vice President actually sits as the final seat. He actually is over, he could actually become the Senate Majority Leader. Not Majority Leader. The one that basically runs the Senate and also the House. So he could be the Speaker of the House, if they so desire to have that. But from the POTUS, you have the cabinet. You have DoD, which is the Army, Joint Chiefs, Navy, also the NSA, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and now the Space Force. Well, actually, yeah, Space Force and Coast Guard. Now, Coast Guard is technically out under Homeland Security now. I know because my dad's there, and I have a lot of discussions with military that say, oh, the Coast Guard's not military. Well, in time of war, it is, but it also works under Homeland Security thanks to, I think it was Obama, maybe it was Clinton. I'm not quite sure. But it used to be under DoD. Okay, in there you also have HHS, which basically takes care of your health. This is all the health departments. The CDC with disease control, FDA, Food and Drug Administration, NIH, National Institute of Health, research behind it. That's what the HHS is. Then you have the Treasury, which is the IRS and the U.S. Mint. These are all cabinet secretaries. So these are, someone would become a secretary of each of these. We have RFK Jr., who just became the HHS secretary yesterday, from when we are recording this. DOD is Hexeft. DOJ is Pam Bondi. Let's see, DHS, Homeland Security, Gnomes, Governor Gnome from South Dakota, South Dakota. Department of Labor, that one's not actually chosen yet. State, that's Marco Rubio. DOE, which is Department of Education, that is, can't remember her name, on the tip of my tongue, but that one might not actually exist. That might be spread out to the others to take care of, because it's got a lot of issues, such as we are one of the lowest ranking countries when it comes to education, and we spend the most per student. So one of Trump's plans is actually to give that money to the states. So basically you have like 50 different experiments of how the education system is going to work. The thing is, some people are like, oh, I don't want all these experiments because some will fail. Well, no. A lot of them will succeed. And because they succeed, the failing states will be able to learn from them and turn around and do that. And they'll probably fail quickly and succeed quickly. So they'll actually find models that'll actually work. And it's because of people like us, you and I, that we will be able to help them out with how to develop their systems. We do curriculum. We would love to help a lot of these states sell their curriculum or provide for their curriculum. Okay, then you have, where was I? Department of Education, Treasury, can't remember his name. And you have additional ones such as DOC, which is Department of Commerce. This is, ED, that's Department of Education. Sorry, DOE. I don't remember who's DOE. So, sorry about that. ED is Department of Education. DOE is Department of Energy. You have the VA. So that's the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is very important, and they're not touching that budget. If anything, they'll be working on the contracts in there to make it better for the VAs or for the veterans, but they're not going to do much in there. HUD is Department of Housing and Urban Development. So housing projects of federal size, that's HUD. And a lot of the rules and regulations within that. You have the Department of Transportation, USDA. Now, and last one, Department of Interior. Okay, so yes, that's the cabinet. It was not that way in the very beginning. In the beginning, there's only like, I think 4, maybe 5 different cabinets. This is what it is today. Now let's come over here. Yeah, and DOE has all these different stations as well. Department of Justice has a Attorney General, who is Pam Bondi. Then you have the who's under them, FBI, which is the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the AFT, which is the Trades and Firearms. Yeah, I don't exactly remember that one. DEA, Department of yeah, I don't remember. I know a lot of these, but I don't remember every single one, especially not on the spot. U.S. Marshals and the Office of Special Counsel. So This is how the government is set up these days. You have all of these people looking over all the different departments. Again, it started off with like 5, and it grew and it grew and it grew. Now, the last one is the judicial branch, which is basically the court system. Now, it's interesting that they have SCOTUS. They are the defining factor. Let's start from down here, though. We have district courts. So a state has a state court and a state Supreme Court. But then they have the district courts, which you can appeal to if you don't like the ruling. The ruling goes from your courts, local or localized, to the Supreme Courts. If the Supreme Courts can't decide on it, or if it gets appealed from the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court, it goes to the district courts, which then goes up to the circuit courts, and then finally finds it up to SCOTUS. Now, interesting enough, this is actually something that goes back to Judaism. So Moses, so again, we were just talking about ancient Israel 2 months ago in ancient civilizations history. We were talking about how Moses was in charge of basically everyone, making decisions for everyone. He was the judge of everywhere, of all the, million people that were with him, that came into the Sinai from Egypt. And his father-in-law, now this is the story, this is the basis around it. His father-in-law basically says, you can't do this, you're going to kill yourself. You need to trust others to do it. You need to have these people being the judges that are underneath you. You need to have judges underneath those and out to the different tribes so they can judge themselves and appeal upwards until it gets back to you if so needed. This is the same thing. That's just something that's really cool. Okay, so I'm way off track because I have a lot more to talk about and so little time. So let's get back into what we were talking about. Okay, so coming in, they had these goals. They wanted to create this new government. And they had all these different plans. Well, they finally went with the Virginia plan, which was designed by James Madison. And this plan basically benefited the large states like Virginia, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, giving them more power at the beginning. The opposition, the smaller states, didn't like that. The New Jersey plan, let's go back to those plans. There we go. Get rid of this. Close it. There we go. Okay. So we have the Virginia plan, which is Madison's, gave too much power to the larger states. You had the New Jersey plan. William Patterson of New Jersey offered this alternative to the Virginia plan. Now, this plan would maintain equal representation like under the Articles of Confederation, but as I said, it puts all the power basically in the Congress, because everything comes out from the Congress. That was the problem. The larger states rejected this because it also made it so that everyone had equal representation in the Congress. So that was booted out. Finally, there was a great compromise. This is what we call the Connecticut Compromise. This is where Roger Sherman, remember I told you he was one of the most important people that was at this Continental Congress. He actually decided or proposed a compromise. House of Representatives based on the population made the big states very happy. The slave states, though, and you'll hear this discussion sometime in the future, it's called the 3/5 clause. So every every African slave who was in the southern states or any slave state, the big states wanted them to count as one. Well, if they were counted as one person, it would give overwhelming strength to the larger states, especially those in the South that had huge populations of slaves. Well, they didn't like that. So the compromise was actually to say, okay, each slave could be considered as 3/5 in the population that the House of Representatives was based on. And people are like, okay, we can do that. Yeah, sure. That gave them basically equal grounds with the larger states that were up in the north, instead of giving them overwhelming strength over any other states in the north, the ones that didn't have the slaves and could even bring in more slaves at the time. So this compromise saved the convention, ensuring that both large states and small states had a voice. Now, again, I had so many more things to talk about, and I went on to a rant of how our government is set up right now. But so the next thing they had to do is they had to create an executive branch. The fear was that they would have another king. They did not want a dictator or a monarch. So the debate basically went that after the American Revolution, Americans hated the idea of a powerful leader like a king who was king forever. But there were others, like Alexander Hamilton, who believed a weak executive would make the government ineffective and chaotic. So, the different proposals that came up, some delegates wanted a single president, which others feared it was too much power. Others suggested to have multiple people in the executive branch. So you had multiple kings, much like they did in Rome. Yeah, the Roman Republic, yeah, just there. And you remember how that ended? Not very well. Some wanted the state legislature to be the executive of basically what was decided in Congress. Now, this is when we came up with the Electoral College Compromise. Now, the Electoral College, we're going to go more into that when we get into the first election. But let me just tell you some things that there was in the compromise. The delegates settled on a single president, but elected every 4 years. Okay, so 4 years. Now, also, rather than a direct popular vote, which is what a lot of people like to say today, oh, we should have the popular vote. The popular vote is so much more accurate to what everyone wanted. Well, there's a reason why they didn't have that. And you can read the whole debate. I actually do a full debate on both sides in the textbook, so you'll be able to read what the issues were in that sense. But this would make it so that the states would choose electors, so this is why they chose the Electoral College, because with the popular vote, say the president, the current president, goes to California and says, I'm going to give you guys all this extra money from the federal government because I want you to vote for me. And I'm going to make you guys all happy. Who cares about the other states? Especially the small states. Who cares? They have small population. Don't care about them. So all they had to do was go to one place and give all this money to it. And someone that was coming into the government, say the non-incumbent, which is a person that was not in government before, or not the president before, he had no power to overthrow this or to stop this. So the popular vote was counted out because it was not safe to be able to have everyone's voice be heard. So the Electoral College said this is where states would basically choose electorates who then voted for the president. And basically what this is, at this time, these electorates that were basically elected, they would only take the votes from the Electoral College. Now they've actually changed that. A few elections later, they said, you know what, we need to have both. We need to have the actual people voting, and then the Electoral College, the number per state, would come to the convention to actually post who was elected in their state. So they basically representing the popular vote, not on what they wanted because they were voted at some point to be a delegate from the state. So I hope I'm getting this out right. So you have 100 people, and they vote on one delegate. Well, that delegate went to the Congress and said, I'm voting for this person. Well, that 100 people are like, no, we like the other person. Well, that one person bribed, incentivized, I should say, or given the argument they wanted to vote for a single person. That 100 people that voted for that one person had no say in what would actually happen with the president. So later on is when they changed it. But originally, the Electoral College is the delegates would go and they would vote on their own. Hopefully they would vote on what their state wanted, but that was the question if they actually would, which is why they changed it. Okay, that's the executive branch. So we have one president cycled out every 4 years. Now, today I want to also talk about the judicial branch. So I'm going to bring it back to that one image that I have, and of course I closed it. So let me bring this one back. So we talked about how the legislative branch became the House and the Senate. It's through the compromise, the Connecticut Compromise. The executive branch was created basically right here, and the vice president and a small cabinet when George Washington was in here. Now, George Washington was brand new. He was the first president, so he actually had to figure out how to make this all work and get it passed by the states as well. So he had one of the hardest jobs, which is why I give so much credit to George Washington. And now the judicial branch. Now this one was interesting. Why was the judicial branch needed? Okay, if the legislative branch made a law at this point and said, we're going to bring back slavery. Well, according to the Constitution, as we read it today, because with the Bill of Rights, that's how we read it today. Constitution's solid. The Bill of Rights is what amends it or makes changes or adds to it. So in the Bill of Rights, that basically says there's no more slavery. If for some reason, I don't know how it would happen, if the Congress basically decided, hey, we're going to have slavery back, then it goes to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court says that is unconstitutional as per the Bill of Rights, strike it down. Any law that is produced by the legislative branch can be struck down by the judicial branch if it's found unconstitutional. Now they actually have to prove that it is, which is why they created well, let me go through this and then I'll get there. But that's how basically it was set up. So under the Articles of Confederation, there was no national court system. They only had states ones. The federal law was basically ignored. So they had to make the states listen to the federal laws. This is how this was set up, why this was set up. Delegates agreed that a federal judiciary was needed to resolve the disputes between states and the interpretation of law. Also, you may know that when a new judge, say someone from the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, when the SCOTUS, one of the people in the SCOTUS dies, Supreme Court justices die, it has to go to the Congress, the Senate, to elect a new, or not elect, to accept a new new Supreme Court justice, which is actually provided by the president. The president decides, the Senate accepts, and they are added to the SCOTUS. That way, all the states are represented equally in the SCOTUS, in the Supreme Court. Okay, now creating the Supreme Court. The Constitution establishes a Supreme Court. Now again, this is all written in the Constitution, but left much of the structure for the Congress to decide. Okay, interesting. Later, in 1789, the Judiciary Act created a system. So 2 years later, after this is designed, it's basically the same time around when the Bill of Rights was actually passed too. Bill of Rights, Judiciary Act are both things that basically added on to the Constitution because not everything was answered. So this created a system of lower federal courts, which was not there at this time. You actually had circuit courts and Supreme Court that basically traveled around everywhere to fulfill the needs. They didn't have just one spot. They didn't have a Supreme Court building like they do now. So this was a big issue because they were driven insane with how much they had to move around. Now, again, that's more in the text, so you can read about that. I'm running out of time. So really fast, who would appoint the judges? Well, again, it was the president. Now, this was a debate that was in here. It was either the Congress, the president, or the states. So the compromise was the president would nominate the Supreme Court justice, and then the Senate would be the one that approved it. This created a system of checks and balances, ensuring that no branch had too much power. So the legislature makes the laws, the executive fulfills the laws, puts them into order, and makes sure that Department of Defense, HHS, Health and Human Services, Treasury, all these different committees, all these different departments stay organized to be able to fulfill the laws that are created in the legislature. And then you have the judiciary that if something goes wrong, if there's disputes between states or the legislature, the executive branch, it goes to the Supreme Court to make that final decision. That again is why it was so important. So, sum this all up. Okay. After 4 months of intense debate, the compromise, the delegates finally completed the U.S. Constitution. So it took them 4 months from May 17th to September 17th. 4 months, almost every single day of meeting to get that part done. Now, not everyone was satisfied with that. George Mason, Elbridge, Geary, and so forth. And they actually would not sign the Constitution. They would not ratify it until they had a compromise that there would be a Bill of Rights. And that's what would create the Bill of Rights. But we're not going there yet, so we'll get back to there. However, most delegates believed it was the best possible solution, the Constitution. They created it and created a strong yet balanced government. Now let's see what else I have in here before we end this. Oh, yeah, that's it. Good. Okay. So I'm there. Okay. So let's wrap this up. Let's recap a little bit. The U.S. Constitutional Convention of 1787 wasn't a meeting. It was I said, battle of minds. It was a turning point in world history. The decisions made in Philadelphia created a government we live under today. Balanced representation, executive power, and a judiciary, judges. But the fight wasn't over. The Constitution still had to be ratified by the states, which means each state had to agree on it, had to sign it. And until then, the country was not a country. There was 13 states, 7 of them needed to sign before it became the United States. Some of them would not accept until the Bill of Rights was talked about. So, what we're going to be talking about next time? Exactly that. Not the Bill of Rights, but the ratification of the Constitution. And some other things that have to do with the Constitution. What's in the Constitution. So we're going to get in there. Today, we're just talking about structure. Wednesday, we're going to talk about what's in the Constitution and how they actually fulfilled it. So thanks for joining me on this deep dive into the Constitutional Convention. Be sure to tune in next time as we go through the ratification and the creation of the Bill of Rights. Well, actually, the Bill of Rights we're going to push off to the next week. So until then, stay curious and keep uncovering history. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.